my biological father, called me for the first time in 25 years. And the first thing he said wasn't, "I'm sorry." It wasn't, "I've missed you." It was, "I need to ask you something important." I was 28 years old, sitting at my desk in Charlotte, staring at a phone number I didn't recognize. A 704 area code. Same city. He'd been 40 minutes away. This whole time, my hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I thought they would. Instead, I felt something cold move through my chest, slow and certain, like a door I'd left cracked my whole life had just quietly closed. He didn't call to be my father. He called because he was out of options. And by the time this was over, he would understand exactly what that felt like. My name is Maya Park Williams. I'm 28 years old. And this is a story of how I finally met the man who was supposed to be my dad, and what I found out when I did. My mother, Sandra Williams, was 23 when she had me. She and David Park met in grad school at UNC Charlotte in the mid-90s. She was studying education. He was in business. She described him once, just once, as charming in a way that cost you something. She didn't say much else about him after that. He left when I was 3. No dramatic fight. No big goodbye. He was just there, and then he wasn't. My mom filed for child support. He moved, changed jobs, and the payments never came. She got tired of chasing a ghost. So she stopped. She raised me on a teacher's salary in a 2-bedroom apartment in West Charlotte. My grandmother, Hazel, her mother, lived 20 minutes away and spent more nights at our place than her own. Those 2 women built everything I have. Every piece of confidence I walk around with, every skill I developed, every morning I woke up knowing I was loved, that came from them. I grew up knowing my father's name and almost nothing else. No photos, no stories, no birthday cards. Just a name on a birth certificate and an absence that eventually became so normal I stopped noticing the shape of it. I didn't spend my childhood crying over him. I want to be clear about that. I was sad sometimes. The way kids are sad when they sense something's missing without fully understanding what it is. But most I was just fine. I had people, good ones. There was one moment, though, I was maybe 9 years old, doing a school project about family history. My teacher asked us to bring in a photo of both parents. I brought one of my mom and one of my grandmother. My teacher asked if I had a photo of my dad. I said no. She said, "Oh, that's okay, sweetie." And something about the way she said it, that particular brand of gentle pity, made me feel the absence for real. Just for a second. Then I packed up my folder and moved on. That was the version of me David Park walked away from. A little girl doing homework and moving on. 25 years later, he wanted back in. The call came through my cousin Brianna, on his side of the family. I'd met Brianna twice, maybe 3 times, at some gathering I barely remembered. She texted me out of nowhere in February saying my father wanted to reconnect and asking if she could give him my number. I sat with that text for 2 days. Here's the thing about a moment like that. It should feel simple. Say yes or say no. But it's not simple, because underneath the adult version of you who has built a whole life and knows better, there's still a version of you that's 9 years old with a school project and no photo. And that version of you is curious in ways you can't fully control. I told Brianna she could give him the number. He called 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that lasted 47 seconds. His voice was lower than I expected. Careful, rehearsed. He said he'd been thinking about me for a long time and that he had something important he wanted to discuss. Not, "I want to apologize." Not, "I want to know you." Something important he wanted to discuss. I called him back that evening. He picked up on the first ring. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. He asked a few surface questions. What did I do for work? Where did I live? Was I doing okay? He said he was proud of what I'd built. He didn't know anything about what I'd built. He said he'd thought about reaching out for years, but wasn't sure I'd want to hear from him. Then, around the 15-minute mark, he got to it. He was sick, aplastic anemia. His bone marrow wasn't producing blood cells the way it should. He needed a transplant. His doctor had told him the best chance for a successful match was a biological relative. His other kids, 2 of them from his marriage, had been tested. Neither was a match. His ex-wife's family was an option. That left me. He didn't say that left me exactly. He framed it more carefully than that. He said he was hoping we could reconnect and explore whether there was any way I might be able to help with a medical situation. He said he understood if it was too much to ask. Cold spread through my chest. My fingers went still on the desk. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I said I would think about it, and I'd be in touch. I hung up and sat in the quiet for a while. Then I opened my laptop and started doing what I do when I need to understand something. I started looking. I want to be careful here, because what I found didn't make me angry right away. It made me methodical. There's a difference. I started with public records. His name, David Park, paired with Charlotte, North Carolina. His current address came up in a neighborhood called Steel Creek. I pulled up the map. 41 minutes from where I grew up. Not across the country. Not in another state. 41 minutes. I found property records next. He bought the Steel Creek house in 2007. That's when I was 10 years old. He had been 40 minutes away since I was 10. I found a LinkedIn profile. It was sparse, but there was enough. He'd worked for a regional logistics company for most of the 2000s, then transitioned to consulting. He wasn't struggling financially. He wasn't hiding in poverty somewhere, unable to reach out. He was doing fine. He had a life. He just hadn't included me in it. Then I found something else. A wedding announcement from 2001 in a local paper that had been digitized. David Park and a woman named Christine Yoon, married in April 2001. I was 4 years old. He left my mother, left me, and was married to someone else within 2 years. The announcement mentioned they were based in the Charlotte area. He never left Charlotte. Not once. I kept my voice even when I told my mother that evening. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I know." She'd suspected as much, but never had the energy to confirm it. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her I hadn't decided yet. That was true, but I was starting to build something in my head. A picture. A case. My cousin Brianna called the next day to check in. I asked her, carefully, how long she'd known David and how he'd come to contact her about reaching me. She said he'd reached out to her a few months ago. She thought he seemed genuine. She'd lost her own dad young and said she just wanted to help. I believed her. She was acting in good faith. He was using her good faith as a delivery mechanism. I spent the next week gathering information. I'm a graphic designer. I spend my professional life looking at how things are arranged, what's visible, what's deliberately hidden, what someone wants you to see first. I applied that lens to David Park. His Facebook was set to partial public. There were photos going back to 2012, family photos. His 2 kids, a son named Jason and a daughter named Lily. Holiday gatherings, a vacation to Myrtle Beach. A photo from what looked like his son's high school graduation, dated 2019. Normal, full family life. Photographed and posted and shared. None of it included me. Not a mention, not an acknowledgement. Not a single post that said, "I also have a daughter I've never met." His family didn't know I existed. I was almost certain of that. I called a woman named Patricia Green, a family law attorney in Charlotte who a friend had recommended after her own custody situation. I explained the circumstance, not a divorce, but I needed to understand my rights and position in a situation involving a biological parent. She listened, asked clarifying questions, and told me a few things worth knowing. First, he had no legal claim on me and no legal standing to demand anything from me. I was an adult. This was entirely voluntary. Second, if he had a legitimate medical need, that was between him and his doctors. I could choose to be tested or not, and there was absolutely no legal or moral obligation to do so. Third, she recommended I document every conversation going forward. Every call, every text, every email. Keep a record. I thanked her and started keeping a log. I texted David and told him I was open to meeting in person before making any decisions. He responded within 4 minutes. He suggested a coffee shop near his neighborhood in Steel Creek. I suggested a place in Plaza Midwood, closer to me, more on my terms. He agreed. We met on a Thursday morning in March. I got there 15 minutes early and chose a table with a clear line of sight to the door. When he walked in, my first thought was that I could see myself in his face. That was strange. Not painful exactly, just strange, like looking at a reflection in water that's slightly wrong. I have his eyes. I have his jaw. I spent 28 years seeing this face in the mirror every morning without knowing where it came from. He looked nervous. He was dressed carefully. He smiled when he saw me, and it was the smile of a man who knew he was on uncertain ground and was hoping charm would help. We ordered coffee. He started talking. He said he owed me an explanation. I let him give it. His version of the past 25 years went roughly like this. He was young and scared when I was born. He and my mother had a complicated relationship. He made choices he wasn't proud of. He thought about reaching out many times but didn't know how. And then years passed and it seemed too late. He said this carefully, smoothly, like he'd practiced it. I listened. I nodded. And then I said, "When did you move back to Charlotte?" He paused. "About 17 years ago. So 2007. I was 10. Another pause. Smaller. Around then, yes. And in the 17 years since you moved back, you never came to find me." It wasn't a question. He knew it wasn't a question. His jaw tightened just slightly. He said it was complicated, that he had a family, that he didn't want to disrupt my life or his. Here's the thing. I wasn't angry. I want to say that clearly because I think people expect that moment to be loud. It wasn't. It was very, very quiet inside me because I wasn't surprised. I had already done the math. I already knew what the numbers meant. Sitting across from him was just the confirmation. I said, "I want to ask you something, and I'd like you to answer it honestly. Did you reach out to me because you want a relationship with me? Or did you reach out to me because you need a bone marrow donor?" He looked at his coffee cup, long enough that the answer was already there before he said a word. Then he said both things were true. That yes, he needed a transplant, and yes, I was the only close relative he hadn't yet asked, but that this had also opened a door he wanted open for a long time, and he hoped we could build something real. Both things could theoretically be true. That's what made it complicated. I sat with that. I told him I would be willing to get tested. Not for him. For myself. Because I wanted to know on my own terms whether I was a match. And because I wanted to close the door completely one way or another. I also told him that whether I was a match or not, I needed him to understand something. I said, "You didn't come back for me. You came back for what you needed. And I'm not angry about that, because I'm not surprised. But I need you to stop framing this as a reconnection, because we were never connected. You left when I was 3. You were 40 minutes away for 17 years, and you made a choice every single day not to come. That's not a complicated situation. That's just a choice. And now you need something, and you made another choice, and that's fine. But don't ask me to pretend those are the same." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said he was sorry. I couldn't tell if he meant it. I'm still not sure. I got tested 2 weeks later at Atrium Health. The process was simple. A cheek swab, submitted to the National Registry. Results in about a month. While I waited, something else happened. I got a call from Lily, his daughter, my half-sister, technically. I don't know how she found my number. Brianna, probably, or some other thread I didn't trace. She was 23, which meant she'd been born while I was 5 years old, and my mother was still trying to get child support paid. She sounded young on the phone. She sounded scared. She said she found out about me 2 weeks earlier, when her father mentioned me in the context of the transplant. She said she and her brother Jason had already been tested, already knew they weren't matches, and had already told their father no, not to the transplant, but to a relationship. They'd cut contact with him a year earlier. She said, for reasons she wasn't specific about, but that involved a pattern of behavior she'd grown up watching. She said, "He does this. He shows up when he needs something. I just wanted you to know, in case no one told you." I thanked her. We talked for about 20 minutes. She was careful and honest, and I found myself respecting her. Before she hung up, she said she hoped things went okay for me regardless of how it turned out. I sat with that call for a long time. His own children. The ones he'd stayed for, the ones he'd built a life around, had walked away from him. His wife had left him. His resources were gone. I was not a person he'd discovered he missed. I was a last option on a list. And I already knew all of that. But hearing it from someone who had lived inside his life made it solid in a way it hadn't been before. The results came back on a Tuesday. I was not a match. I'm going to tell you something that might sound strange. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't devastated either. I just felt the information settle into place. Clean and final, like the last piece of something snapping shut. I called David that afternoon and told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said he was sorry to hear that, and that he hoped we could still keep talking. I told him I needed a few days to think. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote out everything I wanted to say to him. Not to send, just to have. I've been carrying versions of this speech for years without knowing it, assembling it slowly, piece by piece, every time someone asked about my dad and I said, it's complicated, when what I meant was he's a stranger. I wrote for about 2 hours. Then I called him and asked to meet one more time. We went back to the same place in Plaza Midwood. Same table, actually. He looked worse than the first time. Thinner, more tired. He ordered water. I put a folder on the table between us. Not dramatic, just practical. Inside were printed records. The property filing from 2007. His LinkedIn history. The wedding announcement from 2001. A printout of the Facebook photo from his son's graduation in 2019, showing a happy family at a restaurant I could see was 12 minutes from my apartment. I said, I want to walk through something with you, and I'm asking you to just listen. He looked at the folder and didn't touch it. I said, you were in Charlotte from 2007 onward. I was here. My mother was here. I graduated high school in 2014. I graduated college in 2018. I had a job, an apartment, a life, 40 minutes from where you were living. You took family photos and posted them online. You went to graduations. You built something. And none of it ever included me. Not a card, not a call, not a single acknowledgement that I existed. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, your daughter Lily called me. She told me what your kids have told you directly. You show up when you need something. So I want to be honest with you about what I know, because I think you deserve honesty even if you haven't offered me much of it. You didn't call me because you miss me. You called me because you ran out of other options. And that's okay. I'm not going to tell you you're a bad person, but I'm also not going to pretend this is something it isn't. He started to speak. I shook my head gently. I'm not a match, I said, so I can't help you with a medical situation. And in terms of a relationship, I don't think I want one. Not because I'm angry. I've spent a lot of years not being angry about you, and I'd like to keep it that way. But because I think a relationship with you would cost me something, and I've spent 28 years building a life that doesn't have that kind of debt in it. He looked old, sitting across from me. Genuinely old. He said he understood. He said he was sorry, more slowly this time, less rehearsed. He said he wished he'd been different. I said, I know. I picked up the folder, stood up, and then I said the thing I'd written at my kitchen table the night before, the thing I'd been assembling without knowing it for years. I said, I needed a father. For a long time I needed one. My grandmother stepped in. My mother worked doubles to make up for what you didn't send. I had people, but there was a space where you were supposed to be, and I want you to know what filled it. Not resentment. People, good ones. People who showed up, and because of them I'm fine. Actually fine. Not despite you leaving, just independent of it. You don't factor into how I turned out, and I think that's the most honest thing I can tell you. He didn't say anything. His eyes were wet. I don't know what he was feeling. I didn't ask. I left the coffee shop and walked to my car. The March air was cold and clear. I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes and noticed my hands were completely still. That was 8 months ago. I've thought about David Park, less than I expected since then. Lily texted me once, in June, just to check in. We've talked a few times. She's thoughtful and direct. And whatever relationship we eventually have will be one we build ourselves, on our own terms, with no one else's baggage attached. I think I'd like to know her. Maybe we'll get there. My mother cried when I told her how the last meeting went. Not sad crying, the other kind. She said she was proud of me for going at all. My grandmother said, "Good. Now come eat something." That's my family. That's who showed up. David is still waiting on a match through the National Registry. I hope he finds one. That's not sarcasm. I genuinely hope he gets the treatment and survives, because a man dying in a one-bedroom apartment having burned every bridge behind him is not a satisfying ending. It's just a sad one, and I don't need his suffering to feel okay about my own life. Here's what I know now that I didn't fully know before. Absence doesn't always feel like grief. Sometimes it just becomes the shape of normal, and you build around it so naturally that you don't notice the architecture until something comes along and points at the empty space. And when someone comes back after 25 years, the question isn't whether you can forgive them. You might already have, without even realizing it. The real question is whether you owe them access to your life because of biology, and the answer is no. Blood is not a contract. Love is a practice. Showing up is the work. And if someone didn't do the work when you needed them to, they don't get to collect the interest later. I'm 28 years old. I design things for a living: logos, layouts, visual systems. I think about how space is used, what belongs where, what's been left out on purpose, and what's been left out by mistake. I'm good at my job. I have an apartment I love, a friend group that treats me like family, a mother who taught me what strength looks like, and a grandmother who never once let me feel like less. And I have a half-sister I'm slowly getting to know, one careful conversation at a time. The man I met in a coffee shop in March was a stranger. He'll probably always be a stranger. And I've made my peace with that, not the dramatic, movie-ending kind of peace, but the quiet, lasting kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience. My name is Maya Park Williams. I am my mother's daughter. I am my grandmother's granddaughter. I built something good from the materials I was given, and I'm just getting started.